Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Riley McManus. The Long Lake 58 First Nation and the entire Greenstone region are in shock and in mourning, following a tragic incident in the First Nation. A 7-year-old boy has died after his bicycle collided with a pickup truck at around 5 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. OPP Constable Matthew Foster says the whole situation is tragic.
Members of the Greenstone OPP detachment, along with EMS, responded to a report of a single motor vehicle collision involving a youth bicyclist in Long Lake 58 First Nation. One youth was located with life-threatening injuries and transported to hospital by EMS, where they were later pronounced deceased. Something this tragic. Our thoughts are with the family of this youth, members of the community, and we're with them and support them through this tragic time.
The Mattawa Chiefs Council issued a statement saying their hearts are broken as they mourn the tragic passing of the grade 2 student. A sacred fire has been lit for the boy and will burn for 4 days. There's light at the end of the tunnel for evacuees from Avmatunk First Nation. New water testing has come back with encouraging results, which means the community could have running water again soon, more than 3 weeks after the water treatment plant was damaged by a fire. Lee Noonan spoke with Chief Saul at Lucan earlier this week.
Despite worries that water treatment systems could have been contaminated by burning chemicals when the fire damaged the plant, recent testing shows water quality that's up to par with Avmatung's water before the arson. That's according to Chief Saul at Lucan. The water is not potable and hasn't been since 2001.
We're still going to continue to the water advisory in our community. But it's good for everyday use, such as, washing clothes and dishes and whatever else you need to do with water.
Atlucan says it'll take roughly 2 days to flush the water treatment system, and if all goes well, they could be up and running fairly quickly after that. It's been 3 weeks already that the plant has been out of commission. Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu attributes the long process to the First Nations' remoteness.
Sometimes parts are rare and come from the United States or other places. And so, when a critical piece of infrastructure like a water plant is damaged in a First Nation, there is often not any backup. There's not a secondary plant or another source of water that can be easily acquired. It's really difficult for people to be evacuated for this length of time.
The First Nation hosted a mini powwow at the Valhalla on Monday evening. Atlucan says it's very important to have something to do for the hundreds of people who've been forced from their homes. And he says community members were very happy to hear that there's an end in sight.
You can just imagine what it's like when you're uprooted from your own environment and get having to stay at the hotel, and that is limited things you can do. And kids of course get restless.
Atlucan wouldn't give a timeline as to when evacuees may start returning. He cautiously doesn't want to get anybody's hopes up. However, he did say planning for logistics are already underway, making sure there are planes at the ready when it is finally safe for people to go home. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
For over a century, Winnipeg has been getting its drinking water from Shoal Lake 40, but the Northern Ontario First Nation says this has had a devastating impact on its community. It's now taking the city of Winnipeg and the federal government to court to right the wrongs. Danton Unger reports.
This is where the water comes from when you turn on your tap in Winnipeg. But it's come with a cost to the people who live here in Shoal Lake 40 First Nation.
Go figure, the city of Winnipeg, you can just turn your tap, have clean drinking water. Us, for 24 years, we were on a boil water advisory. That's finally been lifted.
More than 100 years ago, this land was expropriated by the federal government to create a water diversion delivering drinking water to Winnipeg. In the process, the First Nation members were displaced and left isolated until the construction of Freedom Road in 2019. That's why the First Nation is taking Canada and the city of Winnipeg to court.
To address the devastating impacts that our community members have faced for well over a century.
I can't comment on the lawsuit, but I can say that significant investments in Shoal Lake have made the quality of life much better there. In fact, when I was there, members were coming back to community to live and to work, and there are lots of great things happening, but it doesn't erase the pain and suffering.
A statement of claim from the First Nation is seeking compensation from Winnipeg and Canada It says the waterworks disrupt and damage areas around Shoal Lake that its members rely on for cultural and traditional practices like hunting and fishing. This in turn negatively affects Shoal Lake 40's ability to maintain its connection and relationship with the lands and waters in and around Shoal Lake, including members' abilities to pass on traditions, teachings, practices, and cultural knowledge to younger generations. The claim says the First Nation still has not been compensated. Chief Kevin Redsky says it's time that changes.
We need justice for our community.
He's hoping this lawsuit is just the first step.
Again, when we talk about reconciliation, we need to recognize those types of stories, not only for Shoal Lake 40, but for every First Nation community going through these issues.
Danton Unger, CTV News, Shoal Lake 40 First Nation.
Local MP Patty Hajdu is holding on to her ministerial roles after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau unveiled a major cabinet shuffle on Thursday. Most of the federal ministries were reassigned, but Hajdu will remain as Minister of Indigenous Services and Minister responsible for FedNor.
It feels really great to continue this work in both of those portfolios that are so important, not just to our region, but to Canada.
Hajdu says she has a number of priorities she wants to see addressed during this session of Parliament. This includes concluding the final settlement payment for the child welfare compensation deal. She also plans to introduce new legislation that will give Indigenous communities stronger water rights. Hajdu adds that she's looking forward to working with the new Crown Indigenous Relations Minister, who was previously a parliamentary secretary.
Minister Gary Anasangari, will do a phenomenal job in this role. He has a huge background in human rights, fully understands the detrimental effects of colonialism and the need to settle claims out of court. A big priority for the Prime Minister is to stop litigating and actually negotiate settlements. And so Mark Miller's work will continue, and Gary will, I think, admirably do that work.
The cabinet shuffle this week once again left out local MP Marcus Pawlowski, who will remain a backbencher. Pawlowski says he wasn't surprised by the decision, and he says he's okay with it because, unlike himself, ministers aren't able to criticize their party.
Personally, I see being a member of a party is a bit like being a marriage. 95% of the time you agree with your partner, but 5% of the time you don't agree with your partner. And I think in those 5% of the times, it's nice to be able to say what you think. And I think certainly the perception is that I'm someone who's more inclined to disagree with the government.
The cabinet shuffle saw 7 ministers drop from their roles, with many others changing their portfolios. Overall, Pawlowski believes the shuffle won't cause major changes to the government's direction. One concern he does have is the time it takes new ministers to get up to speed, which he believes will temporarily set back progress.
You have projects you may have been following for a year or 2 years, and then you have a new minister and new staff, and in some cases, it's like reinventing the wheel. So there is a certain loss of efficiency when you start changing the parts on your car when it's still moving.
Federal opposition leader Pierre Poiliev kicked off his Northern Ontario Axe the Tax tour on Monday in Kenora before making his way to Thunder Bay and continuing east. Joe Sadowski reports.
Pierre Poiliev began his Northern Ontario Axe the Tax tour in Kenora on Monday. He spoke at the Perch Bay Resort and posed for photos with Conservative supporters, alongside Kenora MP Eric Malillo. Poiliev then made way to Thunder Bay's Da Vinci Centre, where he spoke to around 400 Thunder Bay residents, before moving on to the G3 grain elevator, where he spoke about his goals for the region.
I want Northern Ontarians to know they'll have a strong voice in my government. With common sense, we're going to axe the carbon tax and reverse the hunting rifle ban and get out of the way to let our resource sector grow, so that places like this can ship more goods and bring home more powerful paychecks to the hardworking people who live here.
The opposition leader stopped by the G3 grain elevator to speak to the workers, take photos, and answer some of the questions that people had in mind. Poiliev's main message focused on what he calls inflammatory spending by the Liberal government, and he also shared ideas about implementing a new testing system for immigrant doctors and nurses.
We have 20,000 immigrant doctors and 32,000 immigrant nurses who could be helping, but they have no easy path to prove whether they're qualified. So let's do in the professions what we already do in the trades and create a blue seal testing standard that would allow a foreign-trained medical professional to take an exam, and if they pass, get a blue seal stamp that would allow them to practice anywhere in Canada.
And when asked about the possibility of a federal election this fall, Poiliev said it wasn't up to him.
That's out of my hands because there's this costly coalition between the NDP and Justin Trudeau. They teamed up to raise taxes and double the debt, double housing costs. My message to Canadians is it's time for a change so we can bring home lower prices, bring home powerful paychecks, bring homes that our youth and workers can afford, and bring home safety to our streets again.
With Poiliev's message of axing the carbon tax being heard in Kenora and here at the G3 in Thunder Bay, the opposition leader will continue his Northwest tour in stops in Timmins, Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury, Kapuskasing, and North Bay. Joe Sadowski, TBT News.
The Conservative leader also touched on the Ring of Fire while he was in Thunder Bay. We'll have his comments on that subject after the break. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poiliev is echoing the recent comments from his Ontario counterpart regarding Ottawa's impact assessment process for a road into the Ring of Fire. Earlier this month, Premier Doug Ford criticized the process.
What frustrates people is duplication of government. So the federal government has stepped in and said, well, we have to do an environmental assessment on top of your environmental assessment.
Ford was referring to the start of consultation in Thunder Bay and Greenstone regarding the northern road link to the Ring of Fire mining area. The Federal Impact Assessment Agency is looking at potential environmental, social, and economic impacts of the road, as well as possible impacts on Indigenous rights, while gauging whether the project is in the public interest. Poiliev spoke to the issue during his visit to Thunder Bay this past week and pledged to reverse what he calls anti-development legislation from the Trudeau Liberals.
That's because of duplicative, repetitious red tape that makes it impossible to get a decision. So investors can bring their money to other countries and get their mines started in a few months. Here in Canada, they have to wait a quarter century, and that's why, after 8 years of Trudeau, the Ring of Fire hasn't even begun. And some of the First Nations are frustrated that they can't even get a permit to build a road there. I mean, what kind of country can't build a road?
After 2 years of construction, the realigned section of Highway 11 near Geraldton is now open to the motoring public. The 4.7-kilometer section of highway was built and paid for by Greenstone Gold, as the former highway was located within the planned open pit area of the new gold mine. Carl Langdon reports.
The realigned section of Highway 11 runs north of the former route for just shy of 5 kilometers and diverts commuters away from the Greenstone Gold Mine's operations. This image shows the former section of Highway 11, along with the realigned section, as it was under construction last year. The old highway will now disappear as the mine builds a massive open pit in the area where the highway used to run through.
It's going to provide the mine with a lot of flexibility in around the pit, and especially the blasting. As you well know, the pre-production is underway right now, and this will just make everything safer for people as we continue to expand at the pit.
Greenstone Gold's deputy project manager, Christine Petch, says the new highway is expected to benefit the community in a number of ways as it brings commuters closer to Geraldton's Main Street.
You'll actually be able to get more traffic into the community, more business, and potentially some opportunities also along the highway here for new businesses to not only support the community but also support the mine.
The price tag for the project has not been disclosed, but the entire cost was footed by Greenstone Gold, which worked closely with the Ministry of Transportation. The highway was officially open to traffic on Tuesday.
Yeah, no, today is definitely an exciting day for us. We started construction on the highway almost 2 years ago now. And the nice thing is actually we're a little bit ahead of schedule even. So we're very excited about that.
Highway 11 now bypasses the former section between the mine's entrance all the way to Barton Bay, ending just before the West Narrows Bridge. Carl Langdon, TBT News.
What was once an 18-hole golf course in Geraldton is now down to 9 holes. The Kennegamis Golf Club had to return the leased property back to Greenstone Gold last year to make way for the massive new open pit mine. But with hundreds of workers in town for the project, the golf course is booming like never before. Once again, here's Carl Langdon.
For 20 years, Kennegamis Golf Club boasted a full 18 holes, but the property that had been leased for their back 9 on the other side of Highway 584 was reclaimed last season by the owner, Greenstone Gold.
It's unfortunate, but we still have the front 9, so that's great.
Although it might seem like a step backwards, Club Chair Terry Dunn expressed his optimism, explaining that interactions he's had with the mine's administration leaves him confident in their efforts to work with the club.
The mine has been trying to work with us. They've been very informative with us. They're very community-minded, which is great for us. So we just want to continue with that relationship and build off of that.
Beyond a willingness to work together, some of the other benefits the club is feeling from the presence of the mine are a little more tangible.
A lot of green fears now because of miners, contractors that are in town, a real revenue boost for us, and that's what we needed.
In a town with a pre-mine population of under 2,000, attracting families who settle in the community offers plenty of other benefits too.
We're struggling to find employees. The last couple of years have been really difficult. This year, we were fortunate enough to find some employees for in the clubhouse and on the course.
And it's clear when speaking to Dunn that the importance of that clubhouse position cannot be overstated.
If you're a golfer and you really needed to have a beverage of some kind, every third hole comes back to the clubhouse.
Carl Langdon, TBT News.
Stay tuned to hear from some of the young Anishinaabe athletes who competed for Ontario last week at the North American Indigenous Games. The North American Indigenous Games wrapped up in Halifax last Saturday, with young Indigenous athletes from across the region returning home this week, some of them sporting new hardware. Lee Noonan caught up with a few of them at the airport earlier this week.
There were more than 80 young Indigenous athletes from the Northwest representing Team Ontario at the 2023 North American Indigenous Games. The team placed third overall behind Saskatchewan and British Columbia, with Canadian teams dominating the standings.
Ontario! Let's go, Ontario!
Ashton Wigwas of Gull Bay and Jenna Kitchikizik of Fort William First Nation did their parts with the girls U14 basketball team, bringing home the gold with a commanding 66-33 win against Wisconsin.
Really good, yeah.
How good?
Like, awesome.
This good. Although Kitchikizik made a few three-pointers throughout the games, both girls agree that the high point of the tournament was the moment the team broke a tie in the first half of the gold medal game.
It was tied game during like the second quarter, and we were just really nervous, but we know we could have pulled through, so it was fun.
Yeah. Deacon Panachis of Sandy Lake First Nation made it to the quarterfinals with the boys U16 basketball team.
It was really fun, we played a bunch of good teams and also met some new people and made new friends, so it was a good time. I think it's different because everyone's just so nice and it's good to see a bunch of different Indigenous from all over North America and stuff like that, so it was really good to experience that.
Athletes from the region participated in almost every category at the games, bringing home medals in rifle shooting, volleyball, and many more. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
Last weekend's Heritage Days event in Schreiber was a roaring success. One of the highlights was the new partner carrying competition, which saw people carry a loved one while racing through an obstacle course. Carl Legden was there.
Third hurdle. Time.
It was fun.
Yeah. Bit of a wipeout.
Almost.
Almost.
Everyone else wiped out harder than me.
If you were thinking couples when you heard partner carrying contest, you're not alone. But that didn't stop the winners of the event, a father-son duo who took the grand prize by thinking a little outside the box.
And here you go, $100 cash prize.
After the success of the first partner carrying contest at Schreiber's Heritage Days, event organizers plan to bring the race back next year, though maybe with a few slight changes. Heritage Days had a little something for all ages, leading event organizers to consider adjustments to next year's race that would allow for more participation from youth.
Feedback from the community is really important, and a lot of people wanted to kind of see the kids kind of do something like this. So a lot of the input was maybe not something so dangerous as carrying someone, but more like the traditional wheelbarrow hold.
The race aside, there were plenty of activities available to keep the kids entertained, including face painting.
It's like a snake coming out of your head. So I got it over at the face painting thing.
A slide, bouncy castles, and a dunk tank.
Soaked? Yeah. Coughing and spit a little bit of water, but we're good. Yeah, good. It's all good.
I don't like hot sauce.
We don't have an arm either, so what do I get?
Yeah, did you meet lots of friends here? That's wonderful. Did you?
That's even one of my friends.
Oh yeah, did you guys get some ice cream or some?
Yeah, I got some ice cream.
There were also tours of the town's fire engines and the community's new splash pad. Organizers decided to move many of the Heritage Days events to the area near the splash pad because of its popularity. Carl Langdon, TBT News.
Idling trucks within earshot of people's homes in Terrace Bay have long been a thorn in the sides of the community's residents. But a new transport rest area, which the MTO is building on Highway 17, should offer relief starting in the fall. The new rest area is being built on the eastbound side of Highway 17, paid for entirely by the MTO. Mayor of Terrace Bay, Paul Malachewski, gave us a quick update on a timeline for completion of each phase. The first phase would see the area prepared to allow trucks to park there, and the next would include added amenities.
The MTO has said that will be up and running, all completed in 2024. They're going to have that done this fall for trucks to park there this winter. So and they told us it will be all completed, washroom facilities and all that in 2024. So that'd be good news. Get some of the trucks out of town. I know there's been some issues before with trucks idling in the Canco parking lot, and the residents in that area weren't too happy.
With a constant stream of transport trucks running through the community, that date of completion can't come soon enough for Tears Bay residents who live near those lots currently used as rest areas by truck drivers. And that wraps up this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. We hope to see you again.